I'm still not completely sure what happened last night. I just can't seem to wrap my head around what I saw, or why, or even how. Maybe writing down everything that happened will give me some kind of peace. Maybe. Let me just begin. I'd been on the road for over 5 hours before I finally decided to pull over and take a wee. I was making good time, but I couldn't wait any longer. My bladder was full of Monster, along with other assorted caffeinated beverages, and it was screaming at me to release the pressure. At that point in my travels, I was in between major highways, and I wasn't even sure I would come across another gas station, or bathroom of any kind for that matter. No big deal, I figured. Urinating at the side of the road would work. Nature would have to be my bathroom. Luckily, it was the middle of the night and traffic had been non-existent for some time. I would have hated for a cop to come by and catch me dangling in the wind. I quickly swung my car into the first dirt pull-off I came across and slammed it into park. I left the motor running as I opened the door and jumped from the vehicle. There wasn't much light in the middle of nowhere, and I would need my car's headlights to help me see. Ain't nothing more dangerous than peeing in the dark. You never know what you might hit when you can't see. You might even hit yourself by accident, and I wasn't trying to smell like pee for the rest of the day. I guess I could have changed into one of my other pairs of jeans I had stuffed into the back of my car if need be, but why take unnecessary risks? A blast of icy air struck me as I got out of the car and immediately made my bladder scream even louder. No, it hadn't been screaming at that point. More like howling, like a cold dog howling at the moon. Jogging to the other side of my car, I swiftly unzipped my jeans and ignored the full-body shiver that hit me when I exposed myself to the cold night. The mixture of warm urine and cold air caused me to feel contradicting sensations in my nether regions. I closed my eyes and let out a loud sigh of relief as my bladder began to empty. Once I was finished and tucked away, I didn't at once rush back to the warmth of my car. The chill wasn't bothering me as much, and I decided to take a moment to enjoy the peaceful quiet of the night. I peered down from the top of the steep embankment and out over a dark valley. Filling the valley was a thick forest that appeared to stretch on for a few miles. From where I stood, I couldn't see any lights, not from houses or businesses or other possible forms of civilization. I was in no man's land, or at least I would have been, until I eventually met up with State Route 33, a 4-lane highway that would take me the rest of the way. There also didn't seem to be a lot of movement or normal sounds coming from the trees either, except for a low serenade from a far-off owl. Maybe, since an inch or two of snow covered everything, the forest animals had decided to chill out for the night. All except for that single owl who just kept on singing on and on. It had been snowing most of the day and into the night, until finally stopping about half an hour before. Thankfully, it had been the light, fluffy stuff that doesn't stick real well to the roads. If it would have been that heavy, slushy crap, then it would have slowed me down and ticked me off. I always hated snow, but for some reason, I have always lived in places that got a crap ton of it every winter. With everything around me being still and tranquil, it helped to temporarily calm my constantly racing mind, which had been a welcome change. I had done nothing but hurry for the prior few days, and it was nice to just stop for a minute to breathe. My marriage had fallen apart, to put it lightly. To put it honestly, my marriage exploded like the damn time bomb it had always been. 4 years of building pressure, like peeing the bladder, until it finally went boom. I let her have whatever she wanted because I just didn't care. There hadn't been much to fight over anyway. We didn't own a house or have kids, thank God. We had a tiny, ugly dog, but that had always been her baby, not mine. I hated that dog. In the end, I managed to walk away from the devastation with what I could fit in my car. And having your entire life fit into a blue Chevy Impala really puts things into perspective, let me tell you. When I had been 18, like most naive assholes, I couldn't have run away from home fast enough. I had dreams to chase, mistakes to make, and a crazy girl to marry. But when the dust settled on my marriage, That was where I was headed back to. Home. My real home. And I couldn't get back to my parents and the town I grew up in fast enough. As I continued to peer into the distance, I could see the black outline of the Appalachian Mountains standing tall on the horizon, barely visible against the night sky. Black on black as a way of blending together. With the mountains in my sight, I knew that my destination was only a few more hours away. A pair of headlights suddenly pulled me from my thoughts. Two bright orbs coming down the stretch of road I was standing beside. They were headed in the direction I'd been coming from. Damn, the vehicle's high beams momentarily blinded me, but I threw both my hands up real quick. I was able to partially block out the bright light until it shifted away from my eyes, and I could see again. When the headlights from my own car fell across this new arrival, I could tell that it was a car smaller than my Chevy. A compact, possibly foreign, dark blue. My Impala's headlights also fell on something else. A massive patch of ice on the road. The spot of ice was several yards long and wide enough to take up an entire lane of road, while still having enough width to spill over the other lane as well. Normally, black ice didn't scare me. It wasn't the evil villain some people made it out to be. Yet, by how clearly the surface reflected the moon, which had finally found a space between clouds from which to peek out, I could tell that the ice was thick and solid. There was nothing I could have done but hope that the approaching compact car had good tyres and a calm driver. Maybe the driver would notice the ice and take the other lane to avoid it. That's what I would have done. There hadn't been any oncoming traffic, making that the smart choice. But the driver never saw the black ice. Instead, the compact car took it dead center. From start to finish, everything that happened next only took a few seconds. The compact car began to slide as soon as it hit the ice. Its back end started to spin out. Rather than make a slight adjustment in the steering, I helplessly watched the driver panic. As the driver slammed on the brakes and pulled hard on the wheel, squealing tires replaced the once tranquil silence. The little car spun, and spun fast. It spun out onto the other lane and cleared the ice. At that point, the driver should have hit the brakes, but the driver was still panicked. I could hear the car's engine rev as the driver stomped hard on the gas. The wheels chose then to gain traction, which sent the car barreling across the road and over the edge of the embankment. At the sight of the car spilling over the edge of the embankment, I instantly dashed towards the other side of the pull-off. Standing and looking down off the edge, I could see the glow of two headlights rushing down the steep drop. Somehow, the car managed to almost make it down the entire decline without hitting one of the trees growing from the side of the hill. I don't want to call it luck that the car didn't hit a tree earlier in the fall, because it might have been better off striking one of the trees growing closer to the top. By the time it hit one near to the ground, gravity had been pulling hard on that car. Not even the snow did much to slow it down once gravity had its hands on it. I can't exactly say how fast the car was going when it finally hit, but when it did hit that tree, the sound of the impact, the twisting of metal and the breaking of glass shattered both the night and my mind into a million fragments. I don't want to be a drama queen, but it all sank into me deeply, all the way to my core. Whenever I try to sleep at night, I can still hear the destruction of that car getting wrapped around that tree. My phone. That was my first clear thought. I needed to call for help. If the driver was still alive, I needed to get someone there to help them. If the driver wasn't, someone still needed to be there to deal with it. After realizing that I had left my cell in my Chevy, I turned to run back and get it. But something stopped me. From moving. A woman screaming. "Help me, please! Somebody please help me!" The screams are obviously coming from down the embankment from the wrecked car. I tried to find a strong voice and yell back. I couldn't get as loud as I wanted to, but I did my best anyway. "It's going to be okay. Just hang tight. I'm going to call for help." The woman's voice became shrill and terror-stricken. Oh my god, help me! Before I realised what I was doing, I was making my way down the hill. The moon had retreated back behind the dense clouds, throwing a thick shadow over everything. As I rushed through the dense night, I aimed myself away from the lights of my Impala and towards the headlights of the wreckage. I clearly remember having images of burning cars and burning people flashing through my head. I didn't see any flames, but there might be smoke. It would have been difficult to see dark smoke when everything else that night was just as dark. I had to act. I had to do something. I had to be sure that woman wasn't going to burn to death while I sat on the phone with 911 waiting for help to eventually show up. If that happened, I would never have forgiven myself. The Nikes that I was wearing were a far cry from hiking boots. They were not meant for descending down a steep, slick hill. Several times, the snow tried to bring me down, take both my feet from under me, but each time, I somehow managed to grab onto a nearby trunk or brush and stay on my feet. I was moving as fast as I could, but I didn't know if it was fast enough to matter. The woman had grown silent after the last hysterical howl. I began to fear what I might find. Keeping the headlights in front of me, I was able to find the wreckage in the blackness of night, and it was as bad as I had thought. The entire front of the compact car had been caved in, crushed into the shape of a large, jagged horseshoe. There was a little bit of smoke rising from the car, but it wasn't black smoke from active burning. It was light and faint, probably the car's small engine being obliterated, and I didn't smell any flames either. Yet fire suddenly became the least of my concerns. The way the car had brutally imploded against that damn tree immediately painted a different picture in my mind. At least, my rushing thoughts were no longer of burning women, but images of death still filled my brain. The driver had been alive and screaming for me, but that didn't mean she was still breathing. Part of me didn't want to go around to the driver's side of the car, but I needed to be sure. "Ma'am?" I called out as I rushed to the back of the vehicle. No answer. "Are you okay, ma'am?" Silence. When I made it to the other side of the car, I saw that the driver's window had been shattered, completely destroyed. I briefly stopped. The inside of the car was dark and hard to see into, just like everything else that night. As I fought against my rapid breathing, I reluctantly leaned in closer so that I could get a better look through the non-existent window. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. "Ma'am?" I said. "Are you okay, ma'am?" It was a petite young lady, light brown hair pulled in a tight ponytail, mid-20s perhaps. But the young lady never moved or replied. She couldn't. She just stared at me, her neck twisted in an awkward angle, wide-eyed, forever afraid of what was about to happen to her. She hadn't been wearing a seatbelt and the airbag malfunctioned. When her face hit the steering wheel, the force nearly spun her head clean around. Dead on impact. Before the accident, the young lady might have been kind of pretty, in a simple kind of way. I remember my heart sinking as a realization hit me. If she had been dead on impact, then who the hell had been screaming at me? A passenger? I looked around the inside of the car, or what was left of it, but I didn't see anyone else. The passenger side was empty, and the door was still closed. The back seat was empty too. The hair on the back of my neck stood up when I heard the same woman's voice. "Help!" It came from behind me, from somewhere in the trees. "Somebody help me! Who are you? Get away from me! Don't touch me! Help!" I could feel the fear in her voice. I could feel it as if it were my own. "Get away from me!" Someone else had been in the car, had been my assumption. With the trees creating a million little echoes, it was hard to pinpoint from exactly which direction the voice was coming. When I thought that I knew the general area I needed to go toward, I took off running. For several more seconds, the woman continued to cry for help, but ultimately, the words died, and all that remained were frightened screams. I yelled back once, I wanted her to know that I was coming. "Don't be scared, I'm here." I used her voice to guide me, because, other than that, I was running blind. But I found her somehow. She must have heard me, because when I got there, she at once turned her head my way. She was a petite young lady, somewhere in her mid-20s, light brown hair pulled in a tight ponytail, kind of pretty in a simple kind of way, her eyes wide with fear. I knew that face. I had seen it only minutes before. It was the driver. But how? Twins? No, I can't explain it. But I knew that I was looking into the face of the same dead young lady. She was on her butt in the snow with her back against a tree trunk. The way she was pressed up against the base of the tree, it was like she was fending off a wild animal. But I didn't see any wolves or bears or coyotes. As I looked down on her, the words rose into my throat before I realized I was speaking. "I'm here to help, don't be scared." But I felt the words to be hollow. There was no help for her, and she may have been scared, but so was I, and there was no changing it. "Who are they?" she asked me. "Why are they after me?" "Who is after you?" I replied. I searched the area again, but I couldn't see anyone else but the two of us. "I don't know what you mean." She then raised her arm and pointed to a spot a couple feet from where she sat. "Them, don't you see them?" At first, I didn't. I couldn't. But when I opened my mouth to assure her that no one was there, the moon peeked from the clouds again, casting beams of light down on us. The light revealed something that I had not noticed the second before. Two figures standing in the exact spot the young lady was pointing. They were human in form, short, closer to the height of a child than an adult, and they were pure black from head to toe, no faces or features of any kind. Just a darkness as deep as I imagine a black hole to be, a bottomless void. But they were also smooth looking, polished. I could only see them with help from the moon, because the moonlight reflected across the two figures in the same way it had the patch of black ice. There had been a stillness about them, or at least there was, until the moon showed them to me. When it was obvious that I could now see them too, the two figures rushed at the young lady. It was so easy for them to grab her, to snatch her by the legs. There was nothing the young lady or myself could do to stop it. I don't know why they waited that long to take her. Maybe they'd been playing with the young lady until I showed up. I'm not sure. I will never be sure. Once the two figures had a hold of her legs, they began to drag the young lady away. She screamed and desperately tried to grab a hold of the tree trunk, but there was no chance of her holding on. They drug her off through the snow and into the woods. I can still picture her face as they drug her away. The terror, the helplessness, it seared into my brain. She had looked to me for help, but I couldn't do anything. I had been useless, or could I have helped her somehow? Could I have kept those things from grabbing her? No, there was nothing I could have done. For a second after the young lady was pulled off, I was frozen by my fear. I did my best to shake it off and chase after them, but they were already out of sight. Even though I'd watched the young lady get dragged off through the snow, there was no physical path of any kind for me to follow, no trail of disturbed snow. It was weird. So instead, I tried to follow the only thing that I had, the young lady's horrific screaming. But even that became further and further away, until finally fading away completely, swallowed by the night. I don't know why I started yelling. I didn't know what else to do. "Can you hear me? Keep screaming so I can find you." I'm not sure how long I stood there, cold and shaking, but I continued to listen for her, for any signs of her. But there was nothing. I don't know where the two figures took the young lady, but they were long gone. At some point, I was able to gather my thoughts and navigate my way back to the wreckage by following the glow of the headlights. From there, I made my way back to my own car, again by following the glow of headlights. Getting back up the embankment was much slower and way more difficult than going down it, but I managed. I found my cell in the Chevy, where I knew it had been plugged in and charging. Before I dialed 911, I took a couple minutes to mentally rehearse what I was going to say. I couldn't completely lie, but I wasn't going to tell them everything. I would have sounded crazy. When the emergency operator answered my call, I told him that a car had wrecked on black ice and hit a tree. I'd gone down the embankment to try to help. My tracks in the snow would have told him that, whether I wanted to or not. But when I got to the crash, the driver had already been dead, killed on impact. I went back to my car, got my cell phone and called them. End of story. At least as far as they know. Until now, I've never said a word about finding the young lady, about watching her get drug off by those two strange figures. But I need to try to finally get the words down. I desperately need to purge it from my mind the best I can. I will never have all of the answers for what happened that night, at least not until the day comes when the two shiny black figures come for me too. I'm not looking for an epiphany or a moment of clarity. For now, all I really want is some damn peace and to be able to sleep through the goddamn night.